My name is Tyrone Squires, and welcome to our webinar. Obviously, the title you should be able to see there from your desktop. Just a couple of housekeeping items before I get started. First, this is not going to be a sales pitch. My number one intent here is to share with you some critical information, specifically around prescription drug costs, that is typically withheld from payers as you negotiate for employee prescription drug benefits. If you have any questions, feel free to chime directly in. Most of our participants, however, will hold questions until the conclusion of the webinar, and during the webinar, take notes. And the reason for that is we move through it fairly rapidly, and some of the information here can be complicated. So I will go ahead and dive directly in. The focus of this webinar is going to center around the PBM or Pharmacy Benefit Management Service. And the reason for that, simple. Depending upon the information that you come across, PBMs control up to 90% of every single prescription that is dispensed in this country, whether those prescriptions are dispensed from a large retail pharmacy network or the PBM's in-house, or in other words, captive mail order pharmacy. PBMs offer a very valuable service and deserve a reasonable return on that service. I'm not here to bash PBMs. We are a PBM, but our key issue as a fully transparent and pass-through PBM are the hidden cash flows to traditional PBMs that make up for artificially low PBM administration fees. Because these cash flows are typically hidden, payers generally do not know the actual cost of their PBM service. So not what the payers are paying to the PBM, but actually what they're paying minus the amount of money PBMs are making from providing that service. That's the actual cost. These cash flows, again, typically go under the radar of purchasers. We want to shed some light on these hidden cash flows. Consider the source here. It is a strong source, but when you take a look at this particular slide, one thing should jump out at you, and this is the biggest problem with the traditional PBM business model. All the different revenue sources that you see here, you see just four there. There are other revenue sources as well that we'll touch on as we move through the webinar. This is a problem because a fully transparent and 100% pass-through PBM charges only a realistic and fair administration fee for their service. In other words, there are no other cash flow, and this is the only revenue source for a fully transparent PBM, as opposed to the traditional PBM where you saw four different revenue sources in that previous slide, which makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to determine the actual cost. So when you do business in a fully transparent fashion, generally it's a good value for all parties involved. As I've already touched on, traditional PBMs charge a very low admin fee, but then augment the low fee with additional revenues from other sources. These are the hidden cash flows, and these other sources typically occur in these five areas here, and we are going to touch on each one of these areas as we move through the webinar. Again, most sponsors don't know what they don't know. Let's take a look at the PBM business model. I'm going to ask you to first pay attention to the contractual relationship, and then secondly, and obviously most important, the financial flow. Pharmacy benefit managers contract with pharmacies to have its clients' prescriptions filled, or those prescriptions are filled from the PBM's in-house mail order pharmacy. As a PBM, obviously, we have to have clients in order to provide these services to. Those clients are third-party payers, or in other words, plan sponsors. Those plan sponsors can include self-insured employers, health insurers, unions, municipalities, state, and federal governments. The PBM, now I'm going to touch on the financial flow. The PBM will reimburse each pharmacy for the prescriptions that they dispense on behalf of its clients, and then the PBM will bill the client for those prescriptions that are dispensed. The problem here, twofold. First, the inflow of cash back to the payer is too low, because as you saw in that slide how traditional PBMs make money, almost 50% is derived from manufacturer revenue or manufacturer rebates. So the payer is not getting 100% of the rebates that it should be receiving. And then secondly, the outflow of cash from the payer back to the PBM is too high in the form of the cost for prescription drugs. And some of that can be attributed to what's referred to as the spread. The drug pricing standard, which forms the basis for discounted prices, is known as average wholesale price, or AWP. From a pharmacy perspective, we refer to AWP as ain't what's paid. Well, why is that? Generic drugs have two prices. The first price is the AWP price. AWP, folks, is an artificially inflated price that no pharmacy ever pays in order to bring a product directly into its inventory. The second type of price is the MAC, or maximum allowable cost price. The MAC price is much more closely related to the actual acquisition cost than compared to AWP. It is not the acquisition cost, but it is much more related, much more closely related to it than is AWP. Let's take a look at an example. On the left-hand side, you've got the generic manufacturer company names in black here. And on the right-hand side, you've got the generic AWP price for Prozac, generic Prozac, the chemical name fluoxetine. And then in white is the brand price. Just to give you a reference, the brand price for Prozac. And then at the very bottom is the MAC price, the maximum allowable cost price, only $25.20, significantly lower than the AWP price that you see above. This leads us to the first bulleted form of hidden cash flow that I shared with you on one of the first slides, and that is referred to as differential pricing. You may see it also called differential contracting. Here's how it works. Billing terms between the PBM and its plan sponsor, the payer, will be based for generic medications, will be based off AWP with some sort of discount factored in. In this example, the discount is 50%. So the payer, the employer, receives a bill for $133 for generic Prozac. However, payment terms to the pharmacy are based on the more aggressive form of pricing, the MAC price. So the pharmacy is reimbursed by the PBM only $25. This leaves a spread or a hidden cost that the traditional PBM will retain in-house in the form of a profit. Why? To augment the low admin fee that was negotiated on the front end. So the spread here in this example is $108. Now, spreads this large are more rare than they are common. They do occur, but they are more rare than they are common. It's been estimated that the average dollar amount of spreads nationally is about $22. Let's take a look at a couple of examples of how spreads are actually taking place in the market right now. So what you're looking at right now are primarily maintenance medications, or medications that people are going to be taking essentially every day for the rest of their life due to some unfortunate diagnosis of a chronic illness, whether it's hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and the list goes on and on, hyperlipidemia. The list goes on and on in terms of chronic diseases. The point here is that these medications, as much as possible, should be dispensed from a mail order pharmacy because there's no surprises from the patient's perspective, and because of the scale that a mail order pharmacy can offer, provided it's a transparent mail order pharmacy, the scale that a mail order pharmacy offers can save the payers money in the short and long run. So here, the first product here, atenolol 25 milligram of quantity of 30. The transparent PBM, through its mail order pharmacy, remember, doesn't make any money from the medications themselves. So the cost for a 30-day supply of this medication is 67 cents to the employer. The previous PBM, however, this medication went through retail at a cost of $3. So when you compare retail to a transparent PBM's mail order pharmacy, the savings for this particular medication to the payer or the employer is $2.33. fairly significant savings there. Now let's compare apples to apples. Let's say that this medication instead goes through the transparent PBM's retail network, pharmacy network, and not its mail order pharmacy. So the previous PBM, the medication went through its retail network at a cost of $3 to the employer, and that previous PBM billed reimbursed the pharmacy, the retail pharmacy, only $2. That leaves a spread, a hidden cost of $1. Again, remember, a transparent PBM does not utilize spreads in order to generate revenues. So if that pharmacy, retail pharmacy, is reimbursed by a transparent PBM $12, then it is going to bill its clients $12, eliminating that $6 spread. So that is a savings to the payer. And then here again is a second example, savings when we compare a transparent PBM's mail order pharmacy to a retail dispensed medication. And then here, every non-zero digit goes back to the payer in the form of a lower cost, because a transparent PBM will not utilize spreads to make money. And what is a spread? Again, it is the difference between what the PBM reimburses the retail pharmacy and bills its clients. Transparent PBMs, there is no difference. And contrary to popular opinion, prescriptions that are dispensed from a PBM's mail order pharmacy do not necessarily translate into a cost savings. In many instances, the opposite is true. The next couple of slides I'm going to share with you are based on research that was conducted by the Creighton University School of Pharmacy. We had no input into this research whatsoever. So taking a look at employer number one, again, a atenolol 50 milligram of quantity of 90, a hypertension medication. The medication was originally dispensed through the PBM's mail order pharmacy at a cost of $38 to the employer. Had this employee simply walked into their local pharmacy on the exact same date and asked for the exact same medication and was paying as a cash-paying patient, not as part of a plan or a group, but as a cash-paying patient, that employee would have paid only $8 out of pocket. The savings in the community pharmacy, $30. Why does this happen? Because that PBM, that traditional PBM, uses mail order as an additional revenue stream excessively, not just marking up the medications, but excessively marking up some medications. Why? Again, to augment low admin fees. It's not uncommon for us to reprice a potential client's claims data and to be able to identify, in most cases, generic medications that should have cost a client for a 3-month supply, should have cost a client maybe 12 or 15 bucks. Instead, that incumbent PBM had billed the clients upwards of $80 to $85 for the exact same medication. Here's the background information on that study that I was alluding to. Nearly 10,000 pairs of PBM mail order and community retail prescriptions for exact drugs and exact dates of service. The conclusion: when the member co-payment is lowered to encourage members to go with mail order service, in layman's terms, when a member pays a 2-month copay for a 3-month supply of prescription medication, the mail order option costs the sponsor more than the retail pharmacy. This occurs quite often in a traditional environment with the relationship between a PBM and its client, and does not occur in a fully transparent and pass-through environment. Misleading contract language between the sponsor, the client, and the PBM, arguably the most significant area in which hidden cash flows are going to occur is within the contract language, because it dictates what a PBM can and cannot do in terms of its pricing to its clients. We're going to touch on these 3 areas within the contract language itself, starting with generic discount guarantees. Consider this simple analogy here. You're at a new car dealership and you're interested in purchasing a brand new automobile. And there's always a sticker price on the window of that automobile, the MSRP, the manufacturer suggested retail price. That salesperson hopes that you will negotiate for the purchase price of that automobile starting from the sticker price, knowing full well that the dealer's cost in many instances is significantly lower than that sticker price. A savvy negotiator will instead negotiate the purchase price of that automobile starting from the invoice cost. And if that dealer doesn't want to share invoice cost, the savvy negotiator will go down the street to a dealer who will share invoice cost. The same principle applies when we're talking about paying for prescription medication. Paying for, in this example, generic medications based on AWP, regardless of the discount offer, is analogous to establishing the purchase price of a brand new automobile based on the MSRP price. On the flip side, paying for prescription medications, and this is the operative word here, based on transparent MAC prices, not AWP, but transparent MAC prices, is instead analogous to establishing a purchase price of a brand new automobile starting from the invoice cost. And when you start from the invoice cost, you eliminate the opportunity to bring back in hidden cash flows, thus saving money. Now, a fully transparent PBM, and this is where it gets a little bit tricky, a fully transparent PBM is going to have the same price list for the pharmacies in which it reimburses and the appliance in which it bills. But this is not what happens. Contract language leads a reasonable person to believe in a traditional relationship that there is only one MAC price list. There are multiple price lists. The employer's price list will be less comprehensive and less aggressive than the pharmacy MAC price list. For example, the employer's MAC price list will have fewer generics with MAC prices, which means that any generics that are left off of the MAC list will be priced based on AWP. The employer's prices are higher on that MAC price compared to the MAC price list offered to pharmacies. The pharmacies are going to always be paid with the lowest price MAC list. The challenge is for employers to be billed off that same aggressive MAC price list. Most sponsors, again, don't know what they don't know, and then contract language will give the sponsor the impression there's only one rebate. If you recall, again, almost 50% of the revenues a traditional PBM generates is derived from manufacturer revenues or manufacturer rebates that should go directly back to the payer. There are multiple names and types of rebates. You see just 3 names there. There are other names as well that aren't even classified as rebates. Why? To hide those cash flows from the payer. It is because of the business that you generate solely why rebates are offered in the first place. Why shouldn't you be entitled to 100% of those rebates? The key here, sponsors may get 90% of the rebate, but which rebate are you getting 90% of if there are multiple names and types out there? And the fifth and final form of hidden cash flow, a relatively newer tactic being employed by, again, traditional PBMs to hide cash flows, is called repackaging. Let's take a look at how this works here really quickly. Scenario number 1, patient goes to a retail pharmacy, has a prescription for Lipitor 20 milligram, quantity 30. The AWP for this product, $147.04. It's a brand product. The pharmacy, because this is a part of the PBM's network, has agreed to the PBM's contracted price for this product, so that pharmacy is reimbursed $128.45. Now, in scenario number 2, the patient decides they don't want to go into a retail pharmacy, and instead they just want to mail the prescription in and have it sent. They don't want to wait. They just want to mail in the prescription and maybe pay a 2-month copay for a 3-month supply. But in this example, it's only a 1-month supply. So the pharmacist is going to dispense the exact same medication. The AWP has not changed. It's $147.04. Until the PBM's mail order pharmacy decides to repackage those drugs. This is legal. It is not illegal. It's just not transparent. So in doing so, once those medications are repackaged, it is able to legally change the AWP. One does not repackage to lower the AWP. it repackages in the case of brand medications to increase the AWP. So now the new package size here in this example is a quantity of 60, and the AWP now is 408.60. Remember, the patient only needs 30, so we split this 408.60 in half because it's based off a quantity of 60 here. We split this 408.60 in half. The new AWP is 204.30. The PBM's mail order pharmacy now reimburses itself $159.35, a pretty significant increase over, percentage-wise, over the $128.45 that you see in scenario number 1 prior to repackaging. What's the bottom line? Every pharmacy benefit manager, every healthcare provider says that they're transparent, right? Not one will admit that it isn't, but there are different degrees and level of transparency. Level 1 is an imposter, yet 6 out of 10 organizations, this is the level of transparency that they're receiving from their PBM. Level 2, again, imposter, 3 out of 10 organizations are receiving this degree of transparency from their PBM. And then level 3 is the real deal, but unfortunately only 1 out of 10 organizations, and typically your largest organizations that have pharmacists on staff to manage the pharmacy benefit receive the highest level of transparency. Negotiating prices or negotiating prescription drug costs based on prices is misleading because, as you now know, prescription drug prices, revenue streams can all be manipulated. Transparency, though, cannot, if you know how to define it. We define transparency as the perpetual elimination of all hidden costs. So what's the number one way to significantly cut prescription drug costs without impacting current benefit levels? That number one way is simply that the PBM must sign as a fiduciary. If that PBM does not or is not willing to sign as fiduciary, first you got to ask yourself why. What are you hiding? And if it doesn't, then it ultimately has the responsibility to act in the best interest first of its shareholders and not its clients. That is the conclusion of the webinar. And now we have time for some questions.